Colonel Taylor, thank you so much for joining us today. Can you please introduce yourself for our viewers and tell us a bit about you and your background?
Well, my name's Colonel Arthur John Taylor, but I'm known as John. And I was born way back in 1947 in the North Riding of Yorkshire. And you're going to be saying, well, what on earth is he doing in Shetland? Well, I was born of a Yorkshire father who was called up, would you believe, into the Royal Scots during the war, and ended up with 12th Battalion Royal Scots here in Shetland. And being a dancer, and my mother being a dancer, they met at the dances and formed obviously a relationship then. And my father was then posted off to Gibraltar, Italy, Palestine. And my mother was called up into the ATS and ended up as an ammunition examiner in our ammunition depot in Bramley, just outside Basingstoke. So at the end of the war, they married, settled in Yorkshire. But although my father was within 20 miles of his brothers and sisters, if I and my mother talked about home, it was always Shetland that we were talking about, because my father took to the place like a duck to water and loved it. We spent every other year we used to come up here on holidays to meet the relatives, of course. And I mean, I've loved it ever since being a nipper. And so when they got the opportunity to come back to Shetland, they came back in 1973. It was the year that Helen and I married. They said, well, you're not going to be coming home. We fancy going to Shetland. We've got a chance to buy a wee house. What do you think? I said, well, get yourselves up there. And so they came up there, and having brought the grandchildren up to visit Granny and Grandad on a regular basis, my two sons love Shetland. Helen thought it was a great place to come to. And so when I retired from the army, this is where we ended up in Shetland. I've always played a lot of sport, which I've thoroughly enjoyed. I was vertically challenged as a youngster and was half an inch too short to join the police force.
Sergeant Major Taggart will join you there, sir.
which is what I originally intended to do. And having applied to 3 of the lower police forces, shortest police forces, West Yorks, Cheshire, and would you believe the Metropolitan Police, the ultimate insult was when I got a rejection from the Met Police. And I was walking through York, which is the sort of our nearest town, and walked past the information office, and I thought, I'll go and see what the Army's got to offer. And they said, well, you can go for a short service commission. And I said, with a broad Yorkshire accent, I said, I actually attended one of the first comprehensive schools actually built in England. We had 2, one in Easingwold, one in Thirsk. We had something about 750 kids in the school in those days. So you can imagine it was quite big. It was about a quarter of a mile long inside. And I said, you've got to be joking. That's just not nowhere near. He said, no, you have a go for it. So I wrote off to Lansdowne House. They wrote back and said, yes, okay, when can you go to RCB? So I left school in July of 1966. I went to RCB in August, and I went to Mons Cadet School in September of 1966, and went through and was commissioned into the REOC in February 1967. A short service commission. Started to enjoy it. My first tour was going to be Bicester in Oxfordshire, would you believe? Joined the Army to see the world and end up in Bicester. And I thought that was going to be my short service commission, because I was only going to be doing 3 years. And then I'd been there for 6 months, and I got a sudden posting order to go to Libya, to RAF El Adam, where we had a depot there that looked after a squadron of armoured vehicles for armoured regiments coming out to do desert training. And so I was second in command of this vehicle company. Second in command sounds glorious, but there was a major and me, and that was it. And I started to enjoy it, and I got the offer of extending my short service commission, which I did. I took a 1.5 year extension, because the idea was that you did 3 years and then came out with a bounty of £200 a year. But of course, what the Army didn't tell you was that it was only for commissioned service. So my 3 years would have been £400, because the first 6 months didn't count. So an 18-month extension was obviously, I was thinking of doing that, and then going and joining the police when I came out, hoping that by then the police force would have waived the ½ inch that I was too short. After Libya, and I had 6 months in hospital with a fractured femur because I broke that out in Libya, then I went to the regimental depot. doing recruit training. I got called up one day to the adjutant's office, and he said, we're looking for people for permanent regular commissions. He said, it's about time you applied. And I said, well, I hadn't really thought of that, sir. He said, go away and come back tomorrow morning with your best handwriting application for a permanent regular commission. So as the adjutant ordered me to do, I disappeared, and several attempts later, I went in next morning, gave him a letter in, and he said, right. And then I was expecting to have to go back to RCB, but fortunately, that was in the end of October. In December, I got a notification that all I had to do was pass the long logistics course in the Ordnance Corps and be medically fit, and I could have a PRC. And I said, but what about going back to Westbury? And they said, no, that's it. And so I was delighted with that. And so that's how I transferred from extended short service through to permanent regular commission. And the rest, as they say, is history. I went on from there.
So have you got have you got a favourite role of your career in the army? You know, you were saying you've been, you know, you got the short commission, and you've done a number of different roles. Have you got a favourite role?
I was very lucky, and obviously as in the RAOC, my basic calling was a logistician. And one of the first jobs I got after my long logistics course, I was based in Devizes in Wiltshire. And as a local resources section commander, my job was to take a team of 4 out anywhere in the world to support exercises. And the first exercise I went to was in Kenya, where I supported 2-3 SAS when they did their annual selection out there. And we did all the provisioning. We bought all the rations, we hired labour, even to buying charcoal, would you believe, for the charcoal irons for the local labour to do the laundry. Wow. Getting the water turned on, the electric turned on, telephone in. And then when the exercises returned to UK, after they'd finished, I would stay behind to make sure that all the bills were paid up, and then come home and then prepare the accounts to go down to Old Sarum. So in the 2 years that I was in Devizes, I did 2 exercises in Kenya. I supported my own company when we did a pond jump west to Jamaica for a month. And then immediately after getting married in 1973, I disappeared off for a recce to Sudan, where 3-2 Field Squadron were doing a bridge building or bridge rebuilding exercise down in the south of what is now South Sudan, but then was South Sudan. And so we were doing all the purchasing in Khartoum and then shipping it 650 miles south by air twice a week for 6 months. And so I was married in August, disappeared there in September for a recce, came back in October, disappeared in November, and came back the following May. So
your wife was not happy, sir.
Well, my wife was an army rugrat anyway, so okay. She knew exactly what the score was.
Then.
Yeah.
So, sir, you spent some time as an ammunition technical officer. Is that correct?
Well, when I came back I finished my tour in Devizes, then it was at the time where to go from short service to PRC, you were supposed to do the regular careers course at Sandhurst. I should also have been looking to attend the Junior Division of Staff College, but I got caught up and had to go and do RCC 5, despite the fact that I'd already been appointed permanent regular commission. So I did that from June of 1974, and then the last week of that particular course, when I should have been doing the exams, I was sent off for psychometric testing to see if I was mad enough to be an ATO, and you were. Well, yes, I've actually got a certificate to say I'm sane, which is not something that everybody's got. And so I went off to do the ammunition technical officers course in January of 1975, which is and finished in end of January 1976. It's a 6-month course, 6 months at the Royal Military College of Science at Shrivenham, and then 6 months at the Army School of Ammunition in Kyneton. And in 1976, I qualified. And so from then, in 1976 until 1989, when I retired, out of those 13 years, or only 10 years only 3 years that I wasn't actually doing ammunition appointments, which is unfortunate because as an Army logistician, if you get channeled into one particular calling and one trade, then you're limiting your opportunities. In the Corps in those days, we had 13 brigadiers. And of course, only one of them was an ATO. So I'd really channeled into the ammunition world, which I have to say I thoroughly enjoyed. And as long as I was serving with soldiers, I was quite happy. I've never been one for sitting behind a desk. And so when I was doing the ammunition appointments, I was thoroughly delighted. My first tour was in Catterick, about 20 miles away from where I left home to join the army to see the world. And then at the end of that first year, I did my first rule monk tour to Northern Ireland to command number 2 section of the EOD company. From there, I was then buttonholed into technically chosen to go and be 2IC and technical officer of a vehicle depot in Germany, which I thought was a bit in for a dig, having just finished an ammunition tour. But then at least I was broadening my horizons for employability within the Corps. And after that, I was then selected to do, well, I'm saying a staff appointment. I was posted back to Northern Ireland after my 2 years in Germany to Headquarters 3 Infantry Brigade as the Weapons Intelligence Officer, where I commanded, I was one of a few people outside the Royal Military Police, I commanded a section of Royal Military Policemen. I had 9 investigators and I had an intelligence corps collator. And our job was to raise a file for every bombing, shooting and find of ammunition that happened within 3 Brigade. And working with forensic scientists, working with the ballistics lab, special branch. A thoroughly interesting job, and thoroughly enjoyed myself. And that was in 1980. And of course, that year I was promoted substantive major in a captain's post. The Corps was short of majors of the bullet mechanic calling, and I was short toured there. I only managed to do a year of my 2-year tour there, and I was called back to the ammunition depot in Kyneton to command A company and be the senior ammunition technical officer there and depot explosive safety officer. So that was in 1981, and then of course we had the experience of the Falklands War, where Kyneton was working 24 hours a day, 7 days a week, which was an interesting experience. And at the end of that tour, I then went back to Northern Ireland to command the EOD company. That was the pinnacle. Yeah, brilliant. Yeah, and that was the time that. Well, I think it's probably one of the operational commands that an RAOC officer can have. I mean, company commanders have got commands, all operational commands wherever, and certainly in Northern Ireland, obviously very busy. But in the RAOC, you don't get that chance very often, and that was mine. So when I went for an 8-month tour, and I was asked if I would extend because my relief had just come from Staff College and hadn't finished his tour. And so I said, well, yeah, okay, what about, where am I going after this? And they said, well, I don't know. And I said, well, I'd like to be no nearer UK than Cyprus. And they said, oh, that's difficult. I said, well, so he's extending in Northern Ireland. So I bribed them to send me to somewhere nice and warm. So my 8-month tour turned out to be 11 months in Northern Ireland. And then I upped stakes and we went off to Cyprus for 2 years, but into another ammunition post. So I was on RAF Akrotiri, where I had the bomb dump, and I had another ammunition dump up in Decalia. But I was also lucky enough to wear the powder blue beret of the United Nations Force because I was their force ammunition advisor. So I got to meet everybody from the Danish contingent to the Canadian contingent, Austrians and the Swedes. And so it was really an interesting tour. And so we did 2 years there. And the children thoroughly enjoyed it. And then from there I came back and I actually managed to get back to an ordnance job in Headquarters Northeast District and 2nd Infantry Division in York, would you believe, another 20 miles away from where I left home to join the army to see the world. And I was SO2 Materiel, and that was at the time when the Home Service Force was being put together, and so we had a lot of work changing over establishments and changing over G1098s and that sort of thing. And I was meant to be there for 2 years. Would you believe? A colleague of mine in Catterick resigned to go and be a probation officer. And again, they were looking around for somebody with an ammunition bent to go and command 521 EOD company in Catterick. And I was down in York, and they said, we'd like you to go up to Catterick. And I said, but I'm meant to be doing my staff job in York. I said, yeah, but we need you to go to Catterick. So I realized then that I was actually being, tunneled into ammunition, which I didn't mind, because I was with soldiers again. And from the headquarters in Catterick, I had a detachment in Liverpool, a detachment in Catterick, and a detachment in Edinburgh.
Oh.
So I was responsible for all ammunition duties from the Humber Mersey line up to Muckleflugger Lighthouse at the north end of Shetland, and including the Isle of Man. So that was delightful. And that was until 1988, when I was then headhunted, I was told, by the Director of Land Service Ammunition to go to Didcot in Oxfordshire to run the EOD desk in Didcot, which was responsible for all EOD activities and EOD equipment worldwide. And that was taking me away from soldiers and putting me behind the desk. And I said, no, I'm not having this. It had come to the time, a critical time for the children's education as well, in that they were just coming up to CSEs and GCSEs and A grades. And so we decided that we'd come to Shetland, or I would retire and come to Shetland, so that the children could have a settled education. And so that's what we did. So I came out in August 1989, came to Shetland. And the day after I left regular service, I was transferred into the TA. And I was then one of the officers establishing the shadow companies for the UK EOD companies. So I formed up the shadow company of 531 EOD company, and guess where that was based? Catterick, 20 miles away from 20 miles away from where I joined the army to see the world.
I knew that was coming, sir.
You knew that was coming, yeah. So my father took ill, and in 1992 I had to look after him, and I couldn't devote the time to the TA, so I retired from there, and was transferred to the regular Army Reserve of Officers. And in January 95, the commandant of the Shetland Independent Cadet Battery, had to retire through age, and they were looking around for somebody to take over, and they said, would I be interested? And I said, well, I'll come and do a 3-year tour and to see how it goes. And even then, it took, would you believe, 6 months to get me appointed. So, I mean, how some of the guys these days joining the cadets stick it out long enough to get that initial documentation done amazes me. They're dedicated, otherwise they wouldn't do it. I take it it's still taking as long now, is it, to get through all the initial application and paperwork and what have you. But then, so I had the battery then for 14 and a half years before I retired. And was then appointed Honorary Colonel, which was quite a privilege. So I've had 2 5-year tenures, and this is my last year now as Honorary Colonel, because I'm, as I said to Tag earlier on, I'm being given my P45 next June because of my age.
Oh.
Well, I'm 73 I'm 73 this year, so I suppose it's about time they put me out to grass.
Well, you don't look it, sir.
Oh.
But yeah, so when I came up here in August 89, I came up in July to have a look and see what jobs were around, and I found a job as the emergency planning officer was going, and so I applied for that. And I arrived here on the 22nd of August. I was interviewed at the council on the 24th of August. I was appointed, and I started work on the 4th of September. So I've been a bit OCD all my life. So 8th of September joining the army, 4th of September joining the council. And I worked it out that if I'd gone through to 65, I would have managed 23 years with the army and 23 with the council. But as you know, the councils were downsizing in 2011, and they were looking at, I think 11 of my grade left all at the same time in the council. And so I took early severance at 64. And so I've been retired gracefully, or disgracefully, ever since. Oh, disgrace. My parrot over my shoulder just said disgracefully. And that was me. That's really me from start to finish.
That's amazing, sir. Thanks for sharing that with us.
Yeah.
So with your experience and you know the history and stuff with the battalion, what are some of your best memories that stand out to you?
Well, to be honest, we've just really the Shetland element of Orkney and Shetland Battery. I've only been with the battalion for a couple of years.
Yeah.
Before that, we were with the 2nd Battalion, as you well know. One of the things that I found has been the best is that when we get to annual camp, then we get the benefit of scale, in that we couldn't possibly offer the cadets the experience at annual camp that we can as being a part of a big battalion. And since we've always been a bit of rivalry between ourselves and Orkney, and now that we've come together, we've now had to combine ourselves as gunners to be against the infantry, which is always good fun. I mean, one of my abiding memories of our independent days was in the early 2000s. The battery from here in Shetland actually came 3rd in the Highland TAC competition, competing against the big battalions. And it was, I think, the year that we came 3rd was behind yourselves and the Black Watch battalion.
So I was in the TAC team that year. I remember it. So.
You're in the TAC team.
I was in
when Ali Blair was running our team. Yeah, and I mean that to me was brilliant. And we've always had a good sort of turnout. And we had a 14-year-old in the team that year as well. So yeah. But as I say, we do get the benefit of scale by going with the big battalions, because we couldn't offer the cadets the breadth of experience going to annual camp. And of course, up here, we can't offer them shooting either. So that at least they get that when they come to annual camp. And they do get a bit of 2-2 shooting and full bore shooting when we have battery camps in Orkney. But of course, it does mean that we've got to, being remote as we are, we've got to do that travelling to get any worthwhile experience over and above what we can do here. But so that's and of course it's always nice to go and meet up with people that you've met before with the battalion, and see the kids enjoying. That's the thing, is seeing the children enjoying themselves. That really gives me a great boost.
No, sir, that's great. Can you explain to us what the 3 letters after your name stand for?
QGM, Queen's Gallant Repetal.
Can you tell us a bit about that?
Yeah, I get all emotional.
Oh.
It was for operations I undertook when I was commanding the bomb disposal company in Northern Ireland. I can't tell you what it was, obviously the jobs, but basically the operators there, when they're doing their tasks, have to operate under standing operating procedures. Would you believe even the Chief Ammunition Technical Officer out there, the Lieutenant Colonel, had standing operating procedures? So any task that had to go out with those couldn't be done by the Rollmont operators. And so that's the ones that came either to myself or to the Chief Ammunition Technical Officer. And so, yeah, a couple of times, they were done, jobs were done, and I was very graciously awarded that.
Oh, that's amazing, sir.
So what does your role then as Honorary Colonel of the battalion mean to you?
Actually, it's quite a perk after having been the commandant of the independent battery. To be Honorary Colonel is as I say, it's the culmination of years and years of my army service. I also think that as far as I'm concerned, in this remote location, I try to be your commandant's link between the cadets and the civil community. And anything I can do to get the movers and shakers of Shetland to support the battery, or support the now troop, then the battery now troop, is how I see my role as Honorary Colonel. And for example, Lieutenant Haynes, Cheryl Haynes, is putting together excuse me a moment. Oh. Getting all emotional. Yeah. I need to blow my nose. I got all emotional.
No, you're fine, sir. Don't worry. We can edit that bit.
edit the tears out, would you? Yeah. How stupid. Yeah.
Oh, not at all.
I find actually that, you know, I was supposed to be the hard bitten one, but I find that the older I get, I get more emotional very rapidly. I can get emotional watching Troop in the Colour, for heaven's sake. Sorry, where did I got to? Yeah, as I say, I see myself as being that link, because we're so remote up here. Then we can't get people popping up to visit the troop every other week and what have you. And so Jim Stout gets up, obviously, to do his admin type jobs. But I see myself as being Colonel Mike's sort of representative up here, looking after, as I say, getting the moves and shakers of Shetland, supporting the cadets. Cheryl's doing the application for training on public land at the moment. And we have a vast area here that we can train on and have traditionally trained on. But I know all the landowners, I know all the tenants, and I've actually been round and spoken to them all, so that when they get their official letter from the army saying, look, we want to use your land for training, then it doesn't come as a surprise to them, because they know exactly what we want to do. We know what the cadets are all about. And I've assured them that because there are a lot of sheep up here, that we don't do this type of training between December and lambing time, so that we're not going to upset the sheep. Yeah. And so I see myself more in that role than anything else. Yeah.
Well, that's great, sir. Can you tell us, now you said you're retired. I don't believe that you're sitting gracefully at home. Can you tell us a bit about some of the other organisations that you're involved in?
Sitting disgracefully at home, yeah, okay. Well, I'm a member of I've got a left-hand drive lightweight Land Rover that my son recovered years ago, and we've got that. And I'm a member of the Shetland Land Rover Club and did 10 years as their chairman. And I now officiate at Land Rover trials when we have trials here, and we take trips out into the hills. Anything to do with the military, then the Lord Lieutenant and the civic leaders, they get me to look after that side of it for them, because they either they don't know or they don't sort of feel that they can get involved. So things like organising the annual armistice parade here in Shetland. And in 2018, I wrote and produced the Shetland Festival of Remembrance, which was held in the Clickham Leisure Centre. And I'm also get involved with the council's Bridges project. And I don't know if do you have Bridges projects on the mainland? It's run by Children's Services, and it's where the disadvantaged bairns who have difficulty coping with school, broken homes, whatever, and it prepares them for either further education or for going back into life as adults, or indeed into apprenticeships. And they do things like vehicle repairs. They do woodworking, making benches, making planters, and what have you for sale through the charities here. And also they get a lot of computers in to break down for the recoverable parts of computers before the shells go for scrap. And because they were working on they were allowed to work on my Land Rover. That's how we got them going with engineering. Then I used to go in on a weekly basis and take them, bake savouries and take them into them. And then they got a couple of the young ladies that wanted to actually cook the lunches for them whilst they were there. And so I've been inveigled into going and showing them how to prepare easy meals. Not that we're doing it at the moment, because obviously we can't. Yeah. But when they get back to a little bit of normality, then I'd be involved in that as well. But I also cure and smoke my own bacon. And I've taken to making chorizo's and bratwurst and bratwursts.
You're making me hungry.
Yeah, and of course my grandbands, they love. Now it's coming to the barbecue season, and I'm making all their burgers and things like that. So yeah, there's plenty to do.
Yeah. No, sir, that's great. Thank you for answering all of those questions. I just want to touch on your bacon, because we're going to ask you some questions from our Cadet Force adult volunteers and our cadets now. And the first one comes from P.I. Robertson from Bray Detachment. And she
Michelle, yeah.
Are you selling your bacon yet? No,
I don't sell it. No, I just I make it, and I sort of give more of it away than we actually use. No, if you're going in to start selling things like that, then you've got to start doing it on a proper basis, and they get involved with environmental health. And although my son's he's training to be an environmental health officer, it just gets far too involved. And I just do it for fun. And if you start doing it like that, it ceases to be fun and it becomes a chore. So as long as it's fun, then I'll keep doing it.
Are you able to post to the mainland, sir?
Sorry?
We like baking over here, sir.
I have actually posted it as far as the Royal Hospital, Chelsea.
Wow.
Well, when my section sergeant, who was an RMP sergeant when I was in Headquarters 3 Brigade, he's a Chelsea pensioner now. And so I've sent him stuff. I've sent bacon to Wellesbourne in, where will that be? Oxfordshire? It's down near Stratford upon Avon. Yeah, I've sent things away to friends and some down to Swaffham in Norfolk to an old friend of mine who well, she's 93 and she remembers, of course, at the end of the war when they used to kill pigs at home and make their own bacon. So she says, it's the nearest thing I've had to the bacon that we used to cure all those years ago. Well, it's not like this thin papery stuff you get out of Tesco's, that's for sure.
So I'll just send you mine and Sergeant Major Taggart's addresses then, will I, sir?
Well, you know the email address. Sorry, hang on a sec. Who else was it I've sent them to? Who was it else I've sent it to?
Brother-in-law.
Oh, yes. Well, my brother-in-law, he's ex-RAF and he's down in Lincolnshire. Yeah. But he's very kind. He sends me a Lincolnshire chine up in return. So that's really nice. Yeah.
What was our other question? Yeah, there's another question from Pierre Robertson. She was asking, after all the different places that you've lived in during your army career, what made you settle down in Shetland? I know
well, I think I explained right at the start, my mother was from the Shetland Islands initially. And as I say, we always, my father took to Shetland like a duck to water. So when they got the opportunity to buy a wee house up here in 1972, they got the opportunity and my mother came up and bought the house, and then they moved up in March 1973, the year that Helen and I got married, and then we had our honeymoon up here. In fact, there's a story behind that as well. If you've got 2 minutes, I can tell you.
We have.
Yeah. The wedding was arranged by my good lady when I was out in Kenya for the 18th of August 1973. And 6 weeks before we were due to get married, I rang her up and said, do you want the good news or the bad news? And she said, well, what's the good news? I said, well, the wedding's on Saturday, the 18th of August. She said, and what's the bad news? I said, well, the job I'm doing, I'm shipping out to the Gambia on Monday morning. And so honeymoon was cancelled. The boat was cancelled. In those days, we only had 3 boats a week coming up from Aberdeen. So that was all cancelled. And a colleague of mine who was doing exactly the same job, he got married 3 weeks before me, and he said, look, he said, for heaven's sake, he said, I'm back off honeymoon before you get married, because I'm coming to the wedding. Why don't I take your trip to the Gambia and then you take the next trip that goes overseas? So it was all agreed by UK Land Forces and the CO of the battalion and UK Land Forces, and that's what happened. So trying to rebook a boat that only goes 3 times a week was almost impossible. And in the middle of August, trying to get a hotel in Shetland was impossible. But we managed to get a week. The first week of our honeymoon was in a hotel in Lerwick, in a twin-bedded room, would you believe? And then we couldn't get a bunk, we couldn't get a cabin on the boat, so Helen and I slept on seats in the lounge overnight to come up. And so, I mean, here we are on a honeymoon, you know. Anywhere in the world you want to go? I want to go to Shetland. Why? Because you've said it's so wonderful. I want to go and see it for myself. And I thought, well, what a start. So we had the first week in the hotel in Lerwick. The second week we shared down at home with my parents in a Button Ben and Bayer. And I helped my father dig the foundations for the extension that he was putting on. So we had the odd day here and there in the car, picnicking and what have you. But fortunately, she loved it and was quite happy to come back when we retired. We always said we would come back to Shetland, and the boys just loved the place when they came up on holiday. And so that's what we did. So when we knew we were retiring, we said, right, we're up sticks and this is why we're in Shetland.
Yeah, that's great, sir. Our next question is from Cadet Anna McDowell from Bray Detachment also. She's asked, did you always want to be a part of the Army Cadet Force?
To be honest, I hadn't thought of it at all. When I retired from the TA and I was on the regular Army Reserve officers, I hadn't thought of it at all. And then it was the then Commandant of Orkney who knew because she was the emergency planning officer in Orkney, and I was, and we'd been at meetings, and she knew that I was ex-army, and we were looking for somebody to be commandant of the battery, and that's how I was approached. And so I said, well, I'll give it it was normally a 3-year tenure, and I said, right, I'll give it 3 years and see how it goes. And so, as I said, I started attending in January 1995, was appointed in June of 95. And that 3 years turned out to be 14 and a half. So once it's like joining the army, and I started to enjoy it, so I stuck with it. The thing is that if you don't do this sort of thing, then I just feel it's another outlet for the youth of Shetland to spread their wings and do something that's out of the ordinary, and very beneficial. It teaches them self-discipline, well, hopefully. And it teaches well, most of them, yeah. Well, we all know what cadets are like, but it does teach them team spirit, working as a team, bit of personal pride. And so, as long as that was happening, then I was quite happy to do it.
Yeah. So there's another question that came from Cadet Robertson, and they were asking, during your army career, is there one particular memory that stands out that made you proud, thinking that I did that?
Yes, when I came back from Northern Ireland, I hadn't lost anybody.
Yeah.
No, it's not strictly true. I did, unfortunately, I lost a soldier to a traffic accident, but I hadn't lost anybody operationally.
Yeah.
And when I went to Northern Ireland, that was the first question the Chief of Staff asked me when I went in to meet up with the Chief of Staff in headquarters Northern Ireland. He said, "What's your aim for the company whilst you're here?" And I said, "My aim is to do the job well and not to lose anybody."
And you stuck by that.
When I left, he said, "Well," I said, "unfortunately, we lost Sergeant Mackenzie to a road traffic accident. Well, it was a traffic accident on a motorbike, but I said I didn't lose anybody operationally." So I said, "I'm happy," and that was that. Yeah.
So
sorry,
I'm just going to say our last question. I've got a question as well that I wanted to ask. You know, you were saying that you've got 1 more year left as being Honorary Colonel. What advice then would you give to your successor?
That's a good question. Yes, as they say on the political briefing, that's a very good question. Yeah, thank you.
You won't get away with a politician's answer.
Well, no, no. Actually, I did one of these interviewing technique courses, and they said they'll asking you 3 questions, and then the first thing you should do is say, "Well, what's the 4th question going to be?" And Taggart just asked the 4th question. I would hope that anybody who takes over from me is interested in the youth, and is prepared to support the CFAVs in their efforts to look after the youth and make sure that they're looked after properly. And obviously, I still think that this link between the battalion and the community is vitally important, because obviously the battalion's got 3 honorary colonels, as you well know. And of course, it's difficult for Colonel Cadet, as if she was the only honorary colonel, to get around and see everybody. And I think it's important that the person nominated as honorary colonel in Shetland stands up to the mark and does actually, say, represent the battalion in Shetland to the fullest effort.
Yeah. No, sir, thank you very much for answering those questions. Now, we like to finish with a bit of fun. So we'll ask you a question that has an either or answer, and you just have to choose your favourite option.
Oh, here we go.
So the first question, we'll start off nice and easy. Cat or dog?
Cat. We've got a couple somewhere.
The next one is truth or dare.
Truth.
Yorkshire or Shetland?
Shetland.
Phone call or a text message?
Phone call.
Chocolate brownies or Bakewell slice?
Neither. Diabetic.
Oh.
Oh no.
Oh, well.
Gotcha.
You weren't expecting that.
But if it had to be a choice, then it would have to be Bakewell slice, because it's less destructive than chocolate brownies.
We can all agree with you there.
Yeah.
The next one is, do you prefer to travel by a boat or by an airplane?
I don't mind. As far as I'm concerned, leaving Shetland by boat to come to the mainland is where my holiday starts.
Nice.
So we'll take boat as your answer then.
Yeah, absolutely.
Tea or coffee? Tea.
Yorkshire.
A TV or a book?
TV.
TV.
Summer or winter?
Oh, summer. It never gets dark here.
Our next one is, do you prefer a bacon roll or a sausage in a roll?
Oh, bacon rolls.
Bacon roll. No, no hesitation.
Oh, no, especially with my home cured bacon.
I know, I can imagine how good they taste. Dancing or singing? Dancing.
Singing.
Oh, singing.
Singing. Wow, I thought you were going to go dancing with your
Me
parents.
too.
No, not with my hips. I collapse in a heap.
Fieldcraft or navigation?
Fieldcraft.
Fieldcraft.
Mainland or island?
Would you allow an officer and a compass and map and a compass out on his own? For heaven's sake.
You're not the first person to say that, sir.
I'll bet. Yeah.
Mainland or island?
Island, but we do have that 200 miles of water, and it does sometimes become inconvenient.
Gin or port?
Oh, we lost you there. What did you say, sir?
Gin.
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 A man after my own heart. And our last question then, which do you prefer, your commandant role or your role as honorary colonel?
Oh, I thoroughly enjoyed my commandant role, but I'm also privileged to be honorary colonel.
No,
Yeah.
Sir, thank you so much for coming on today and allowing us to interview you. It's been absolutely brilliant to chat to you. I've thoroughly enjoyed it. Thank you for sharing all of that information.
Absolutely no problem at all. And if you want to be lucky, I need your address.
I'll send him in an email, sir. Thank you so much, John.
No problem at all.
Take
Thank you
care.
very
We'll
much.
speak to you soon.
Cheers.
Bye.
Bye.